The file was not supposed to exist, and the moment I opened it, every light in the courthouse seemed to dim. I was alone on the 7th floor of the Manhattan Records Annex, where old cases went to be forgotten, and people like me were paid to make sure they stayed that way. My name was Ava Monroe, 26 years old, white cardigan, cheap flats, coffee gone cold beside my keyboard, and a badge clipped to my blouse that gave me access to doors I was never important enough to enter. Outside, rain tapped against the narrow windows like nervous fingers. Inside, the building hummed with that after-midnight silence only government offices have, the kind that smells like toner, dust, and secrets nobody wants printed. I had stayed late because my supervisor wanted 3 sealed probate boxes indexed before morning, and because overtime meant I could pay my electric bill without choosing between groceries and gas. That was supposed to be the whole story. A tired woman. A boring job. A city too expensive to breathe in. Then the archive system froze. The screen went black for half a second, flashed once, and a file appeared that I had not searched for. Caleb Whitmore. Sealed case. 12 years ago. My hand stopped above the mouse. Everyone in New York knew that name, even if they pretended not to. Caleb Whitmore owned restaurants, shipping companies, charities, buildings with marble lobbies, and security men who never smiled. The papers called him a businessman. The whispers called him something colder. I should have closed the window. I knew that. Every decent instinct in my body told me to log out, grab my coat, and walk the 6 blocks to the subway without looking back. But there was a small red mark beside the file number, an internal flag used for records connected to witness protection. And underneath it, in a field that should have been blank, was my mother's name. Lillian Monroe. My breath caught so sharply it hurt. My mother had been dead for 4 years. She had been a night nurse from Queens, the kind of woman who packed extra granola bars in her purse because someone at work was always hungry. She had never mentioned Caleb Whitmore. Not once. I clicked before. Fear could stop me. The first document was corrupted. The second was a death certificate with half the information missing. The third was a photograph, grainy and gray, taken in a hallway with polished floors and a mirror on the wall. Caleb was in it, younger, thinner, his dark hair falling over his forehead, his face turned away from the camera. Beside him stood a woman I did not recognize, wearing a pale coat and holding a silver bracelet in her hand. But in the mirror behind them, barely visible in the corner of the frame, was another face. My mother's face. I leaned closer until my reflection hovered over hers on the glassy screen. Same cheekbones, same tired eyes, same expression she used to wear when she thought I was not looking. Afraid, but determined. A sound came from the hallway. Soft. Almost nothing. My fingers moved fast, too fast, saving the image to a private drive I was not supposed to use. The system lagged. The rain got louder. Somewhere above me, the fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered. Then a message appeared across the bottom of the file. Access logged. My stomach turned cold. I looked up at the security camera mounted in the corner of the room. For the entire night, its tiny indicator light had been dark. Now it glowed red, steady and bright, like an eye that had just opened. I did not sleep after that. I told myself the red light on the security camera meant nothing, that cameras turned on and off all the time, that old courthouse wiring was strange, that sealed archives glitched because half the system was older than I was. I told myself all of that while I sat on the edge of my bed in Queens at 4:17 in the morning, still wearing my work clothes, staring at the private drive on my nightstand like it was alive. Rain crawled down my window in crooked lines. A siren wailed somewhere 3 streets away. My phone stayed silent, which somehow made everything worse. By 8:30, I was back downtown with dry hair, a pressed blouse, and the kind of smile women learn to wear when they are one bad question away from falling apart. The records annex looked normal in daylight. Gray stone, metal detectors, tired clerks with paper, coffee cups. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked why I had accessed a sealed file after midnight. For one fragile hour, I almost believed I had imagined the fear. Then my supervisor, Mr. Harlan, appeared beside my desk without his usual warning cough. Ava, conference room 3. Now, his face was pale. Not angry. Not confused. Pale. I followed him through a restricted hallway I had only seen twice before, past framed portraits of judges and doors with keypads instead of handles. My flats made small sounds against the polished floor. Too loud. Too exposed. At the end of the hall, Two men in dark suits stood outside conference room 3. They were not courthouse security. Courthouse security wore badges and radios and looked bored. These men looked awake in a way that made my pulse climb. One of them opened the door before Mr. Harlan knocked. Inside, the room was colder than the hallway. Long mahogany table, closed blinds, a pitcher of water untouched in the center. 3 attorneys sat along one side, all expensive watches and blank faces. A woman in a cream suit stood near the window, silver hair pinned perfectly, red lipstick precise enough to feel like a warning. I would learn later that her name was Evelyn Shaw. At that moment, I only knew everyone in the room stopped talking when I entered. Then I saw him. Caleb Whitmore stood at the far end of the table, one hand resting lightly on the back of a leather chair, as if the room had been built around him and everyone else was just borrowing space. He was taller than I expected, at least 6 feet 2 inches, with dark hair combed back from a face too still to read. His suit was black, simple, tailored so perfectly it seemed less worn than commanded. But his eyes were what held me in place. Pale gray, quiet, not cruel, not kind. The eyes of a man who had spent years learning how not to react. Mr. Harlan cleared his throat and said something about an internal records review, but I barely heard him. Caleb was looking at me as if he already knew exactly what I had seen. Not the file number, not the photograph. Me, my fear, my questions, my mother's name burning behind my teeth. Evelyn Shaw smiled without warmth. Miss Monroe, she said, there was unusual activity on a restricted archive account last night. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Caleb moved then, just one step, and the room changed with him. Nobody told him to sit. Nobody interrupted. When he passed behind my chair, I caught the faint scent of cedar, rain, and cold air from outside. He leaned close enough for only me to hear, his voice low and controlled, each word placed like a lock turning in a door. Stop looking, Miss Monroe. My hands tightened in my lap. I should have nodded. I should have apologized. I should have done whatever normal people do when powerful men warn them away from buried things. Instead, I lifted my eyes to his. For 1 second, something broke through his expression. Not anger, recognition. Then Evelyn said my name again, sharper this time, and Caleb stepped back into silence, leaving me with one impossible truth. He was not afraid of what I knew. He was afraid of what would happen if I proved it. I walked out of conference room 3 with my badge still clipped to my blouse, but I no longer felt like I belonged to the building that had issued it. Mr. Harlan would not look at me. The attorneys returned to their papers. Evelyn Shaw watched me leave with the calm patience of a woman who had already decided how small I was. Caleb did not say another word. He only stood by the table, silent and unreadable, while his warning followed me down the hall like a second shadow. Stop looking, Miss Monroe. By lunch, my access to sealed archives had been suspended for routine maintenance. By 2 o'clock, my supervisor told me to take the rest of the week off with pay. By 3:15, a city clerk I had known for 2 years whispered that I should stop asking questions before I made people uncomfortable. That was the word everyone used when they were afraid to say dangerous. Uncomfortable. I rode the subway home with my private drive hidden inside the lining of my coat, one hand pressed over it the entire way. The train rocked beneath Queens. Fluorescent lights blinked overhead. A little boy across from me swung his sneakers above the floor while his mother slept beside him with grocery bags at her feet. Everything looked ordinary, and that made the truth feel even stranger. Monsters did not always arrive with noise. Sometimes they arrived with paperwork, polite smiles, and a paid afternoon off. My apartment smelled faintly of lavender detergent and burnt toast from breakfast. I locked the door, then the chain, then the second lock my mother had installed years ago after saying New York was a beautiful city if you respected how quickly it could turn. I sat at my small kitchen table and opened the files again. The first thing I checked was the death certificate. The woman in the photograph had a name. Clara Whitmore, 24 years old, listed as deceased 12 years earlier at St. Agnes Medical Center in Brooklyn. But the timestamp was wrong. The official report said she died at 11:43 at night. The hospital intake form, buried 6 pages deeper, showed she had arrived at 12:18 in the morning, 35 minutes after she was supposedly gone. My skin prickled. I opened the witness list. 3 names had been blacked out. One was not blacked out completely enough. Lillian Monroe. My mother. I stared until the letters blurred. She had signed as attending nurse. Not a bystander. Not a random employee. She had been in the room. I found another inconsistency. A police interview marked incomplete. A security log with one missing hour. A scanned bracelet receipt from a jewelry store in Soho. Silver. Custom engraved. Clara. The same bracelet from the photograph. My pulse beat hard in my throat. I remembered my mother's jewelry box, the cheap wooden one she kept in the back of her closet. After she died, I had donated most of her things because grief made ordinary objects unbearable. But one item had stayed with me for reasons I never understood. A silver bracelet with a broken clasp and no explanation. I ran to my bedroom and pulled the old shoe box from the top shelf. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Receipts. Birthday cards. Her nursing pin. A folded scarf that still held the faintest trace of her perfume. And there, wrapped in tissue, was the bracelet. I carried it back to the table like it might burn through my palm. The engraving was worn, but under the kitchen light, I could still read the name. Clara. The room went quiet in a way that felt unnatural. Then something knocked softly against my front door. Not loud. Not forceful. Just 3 calm taps. I froze. My phone was on the table. My keys were by the sink. The bracelet lay open in my hand. Through the peephole, the hallway light flickered. No one stood there. I waited, barely breathing. Then an envelope slid under my door and stopped against my foot. On the front, written in black ink, were 6 words that made the floor feel like it had disappeared beneath me. Your mother should have stayed silent. I did not open the envelope right away. I stood in my tiny kitchen with the silver bracelet in one hand and that white rectangle at my feet, listening to the radiator hiss like it was trying to warn me. The hallway outside stayed silent. No footsteps. No elevator doors. No voice on the other side. Whoever had left it knew exactly how to disappear. When I finally bent down, my knees felt weak enough to fold. Inside was not a letter. It was a copy of my own employee profile from the records annex, printed on thick paper, with my address circled in red ink. Beneath it was a photograph of my mother outside St. Agnes Medical Center, 12 years younger, her hair pulled into a messy bun, her nurse badge clipped to her coat, her face turned towards someone outside the frame. On the back, someone had written, "Last warning." I did not cry. Fear has a strange way of drawing everything inside you. I took pictures of the envelope, the photograph, the red circle, the note. Then I called Mr. Harlan. He answered on the 5th ring, his voice tight before I even said hello. "Ava, this is not a good time." "Someone knows where I live," I said. "Someone left something at my door." There was a pause so long I could hear traffic moving behind him. Then he lowered his voice. "I think you need rest." Rest. The word hit harder than accusation. I told him about my mother's name in the file, about the bracelet, about Clara Whitmore, about the missing hour in the hospital log. He sighed like I had become paperwork he did not want to process. "You were exposed to restricted material under stressful circumstances. Do not make this worse for yourself." By morning, I was at the nearest police precinct with the envelope inside a plastic grocery bag because I did not own evidence sleeves. The officer at the front desk was kind at first. Then I said Caleb Whitmore's name, and kindness left his face in slow degrees. He asked if Caleb had contacted me directly. I said not exactly. He asked if anyone had threatened me in person. I said no. He asked if I had proof the envelope was connected to the file. I placed the photograph on the desk. He looked at it for less than 2 seconds. "Miss Monroe," he said, "sometimes old family matters feel bigger when grief is involved. My mother had been dead for 4 years, and somehow this stranger had made grief sound like a flaw in my character." I left with a case number that meant nothing. Outside, the city moved around me like I was invisible. Yellow cabs splashed rainwater near the curb. A woman in red heels laughed into her phone. A delivery cyclist swerved around me and shouted something I barely heard. I called my best friend, Natalie. She worked in human resources for a midtown law firm and believed every crisis could be solved with tea, sleep, and better boundaries. She listened quietly while I told her everything from the beginning. Then she said the sentence that made me feel more alone than the envelope had. "Ava, are you sure you are not connecting things because you miss your mom?" I looked at my reflection in a dark storefront window. Pale face, damp hair, eyes too wide. I did look unstable. That was the cruelest part. Truth did not make me look brave. It made me look fragile. By evening, my work email had been locked. My badge was temporarily disabled. Mr. Harlan sent one message saying the office needed time to review my conduct. No one mentioned the threat. No one mentioned my mother. No one mentioned Caleb except in whispers that all meant the same thing. Stay away from him. At 7:28, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. One image came through. It was another photograph, older than the last. My mother stood in a hospital corridor beside Caleb Whitmore. He could not have been more than 22. His face was pale, his shirt collar open, his eyes fixed on something beyond the camera with a grief so raw I felt it through the screen. My mother's hand rested on his arm, not afraid of him, comforting him. Under the image was a single line of text. If you want the truth, ask why Caleb let them lie. I should have deleted the image. That was the reasonable thing, the safe thing. But safety had already become a language everyone else used to keep me quiet. I stared at the photograph until the city outside my window turned black and glossy with rain, until the reflection of my own face looked like a stranger hovering over Caleb Whitmore's grief. My mother had touched his arm like she trusted him, like he had not been the monster every headline taught me to fear. That small detail would not leave me alone. Trust has weight, even in old photographs. Especially in old photographs. The next morning, I went back to the Records Annex parking garage because my badge no longer worked upstairs, but my car was still in its assigned space on level B2. The garage smelled like wet concrete, gasoline, and cold metal. Fluorescent lights flickered above empty rows. Every sound traveled too far. My keys shook in my hand as I crossed toward my old Honda, and I hated myself for being afraid of shadows. Then a black town car rolled slowly from behind a concrete pillar and stopped 10 feet away. No screeching tires. No dramatic threat. Just silence, polished paint, and tinted windows that reflected my pale face back at me. The rear door opened. Caleb stepped out alone. No men in suits. No attorneys. No Evelyn Shaw smiling like poison behind glass. Just him, standing beneath the weak garage light in a dark overcoat, looking less like a rumor and more like a man who had not slept in years. I took one step back. He noticed. Of course he noticed. His eyes moved to my hand, to the keys threaded between my fingers, then back to my face. You should not have come here, he said. His voice was low, controlled, almost tired. I laughed once, but it came out thin. Funny. Everyone keeps telling me where I should not go. He did. Not smile. That is because you keep walking toward things built to bury people. The words settled between us. Not a threat. A warning. I pulled out my phone with my free hand and opened the photograph from the unknown number. My mother and Caleb in the hospital corridor. The image glowed blue-white in the dim garage. Why was she with you? I asked. His face changed so slightly that anyone else might have missed it. But I was done missing things. A muscle tightened near his jaw. His eyes dropped to the screen and stayed there. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, Caleb Whitmore looked young again. Not in age. In pain. Your mother was braver than everyone in that building, he said. My throat tightened. Then tell me what happened. No. The answer came too fast. Too final. I stepped closer before fear could drag me back. Did you kill Clara Whitmore? His gaze snapped to mine. The garage lights hummed overhead. Somewhere above us, a car horn echoed from the street. Caleb did not move, but the air around him changed. He was not angry. Anger would have been easier. This was worse. This was a door opening onto a room full of things no one had survived speaking aloud. No, he said. I held my breath. Then why did you let the world believe you did? He looked past me toward the ramp leading up to the city, where daylight waited gray and thin beyond the concrete. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. Because the truth would have cost more than my name. I thought of my mother's signature. Clara's bracelet. The missing hour. The envelope under my door. My hand stopped shaking, not because I was calm, but because something inside me had gone still. You are protecting someone, I said. Caleb looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the warning crack open into something almost human. He said. I did not understand the past tense until his phone buzzed. He checked the screen, and the little color left in his face disappeared. In one smooth motion, he took my elbow, not roughly, just firmly enough to turn me away from the open garage. Get in your car, Ava. Now. My heart jumped at hearing my first name in his mouth. What happened? He opened my driver's side door and looked over his shoulder at the empty concrete behind us. Evelyn knows you have the bracelet. If this emotional mafia romance has pulled you in, like this video and comment what you would do if no one believed your truth. Keep watching until the end, because Caleb Whitmore's secret, Ava Monroe's past, and this hidden family betrayal are about to change everything in this dark romance story. Caleb did not wait for my permission. He closed my car door, walked around to the passenger side, and got in like he had done it 100 times before, though my Honda looked painfully ordinary with him inside it. His knees almost touched the dashboard. Rainwater darkened the shoulders of his overcoat. The scent of cedar and cold air filled the small space until my apartment keys, my coffee-stained cup, and the cracked phone charger in the console all felt embarrassingly personal. "Drive," he said. "Where?" "Anywhere with people." I turned the ignition with fingers that had finally remembered how to shake. The engine coughed once before catching. Caleb glanced toward the garage entrance, his eyes moving over every shadow, every parked car, every blind corner. He was not panicked. That frightened me more. Panic meant surprise. Caleb looked like a man watching a storm he had predicted years ago finally reach shore. I drove out into midtown traffic, past honking cabs, delivery trucks, and office workers huddled under black umbrellas. For 10 blocks, neither of us spoke. The windshield wipers dragged across the glass in a tired rhythm. Then Caleb said, "Clara was my sister." I kept both hands on the wheel because I needed something solid to hold. "Not your wife? Not your girlfriend?" His eyes stayed on the street. "My sister. My youngest sister. She was 24, stubborn, kind in ways my family considered weakness. She believed money should repair damage, not hide it." The way he said her name changed the air in the car. Clara. Not like a case file. Not like a scandal. Like a prayer he had stopped allowing himself to say out loud. "What happened to her?" I asked. Caleb was silent long enough for the light to turn green and the car behind me to honk. I drove. "My family was divided," he said. "Not in the way newspapers describe it. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just greedy people sitting at polished tables, deciding which lives were inconvenient. Clara found records she was never meant to see. Charitable accounts, hospital payments, private transfers. Names hidden behind foundations. Evelyn's name was on several of them. My stomach tightened. "Evelyn Shaw. She was your aunt?" "My father's sister," he said. "She helped raise us after my mother died. She taught me which fork to use at dinner and which people to never trust." I thought of her cream suit, her red lipstick, her smile with no warmth. Did she hurt Clara? Caleb looked at me then, and even in the gray morning light, I saw the answer before he spoke. Evelyn arranged the lie that buried her. That was all he said, but it was enough. No details, no images, just the shape of betrayal, clean and cold. "My mother was there," I whispered. "Yes. Lillian was working the night Clara was brought into St. Agnes. She tried to keep the record clean. She tried to stop the certificate from being altered. She knew Clara was not just another patient. She knew the story they were building around me was false." I pulled into a public parking lot near Bryant Park because my hands were no longer steady enough for traffic. People moved outside with umbrellas and paper bags, wrapped in their own lives. Inside my car, 12 years open like a sealed room. "Why would your family blame you?" I asked. "Because I was useful as a monster." His voice was flat, but his eyes were not. If the city believed I had destroyed my own sister, no one would question why I stopped speaking to the police. No one would look at Evelyn. No one would follow the money. And no one would search for what Clara left behind. "The bracelet," I said. Caleb turned toward me slowly. The bracelet was not jewelry. It was a key. My heartbeat stumbled. A key to what? His phone buzzed again. He read the message, and something ancient and exhausted settled over his face. Then he looked at my coat pocket, where the silver bracelet rested against my ribs like a second pulse. "To the only copy of Clara's real testimony," he said. "And Ava, your mother hid it where Evelyn would never think to look." I could barely breathe. "Where?" Caleb's gaze held mine, heavy with a truth I was not ready to carry. "With you. With me." 2 words should not have been able to tilt the whole city, but they did. I sat in my parked Honda near Bryant Park with rain sliding down the windshield and Caleb Whitmore beside me, and suddenly every ordinary memory of my life felt rearranged by invisible hands. My mother teaching me to tie my shoes. My mother checking the locks twice at night. My mother refusing to let anyone take my picture for school fundraisers. My mother moving us from Brooklyn to Queens when I was 5 and telling me cheaper rent was the reason. I had believed all of it because children believe the person who keeps them warm. Caleb watched my face as if he could see each memory breaking open. She never told you, he said. It was not a question. I turned toward him slowly. Told me what? He looked down at his hands. They were still, but the veins stood out beneath his skin, pale blue under the gray light. Clara recorded a statement before everything was buried. Names, accounts, dates. Enough to ruin Evelyn and everyone who helped her. Lillian knew the hospital files would be altered, so she made a copy of Clara's testimony and hid the access phrase inside something Evelyn would never touch. I pulled the bracelet from my coat pocket. The silver felt cold, too light for the weight it suddenly carried. The clasp was broken. The name Clara looked almost erased. My mother kept this in a shoe box for 12 years. Caleb nodded once. There is an engraving beneath the inner plate. I had never noticed an inner plate. I had worn that bracelet twice in high school because it looked vintage and pretty, never knowing I was carrying a graveyard of secrets around my wrist. Caleb reached for it, then stopped, waiting for permission. That small restraint nearly undid me. I placed it in his palm. His thumb moved along the edge until a thin seam appeared. With gentle pressure, the plate shifted. Inside, smaller than a fingernail, was a row of numbers and letters. Not random. A password. A key. My breath turned shallow. What does it open? A private evidence vault. Clara created through a law firm no one connected to our family, Caleb said. She did not trust banks. She trusted records. She trusted your mother. And you let everyone call you guilty because of this? His jaw tightened. I let them call me whatever kept the last witness safe. The last witness. The words echoed in the car. I looked at him, but he was not looking at me anymore. He was staring through the windshield at the wet sidewalk, at strangers passing with umbrellas, at a world that had gone on for 12 years because he had allowed it to misunderstand him. Who was the witness? I asked. Caleb closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, the man beside me was no longer just powerful or dangerous or impossible to read. He was grieving. A child, he said. Clara had taken her from the house before the records disappeared. A little girl no one was supposed to know existed. My heart began to pound so hard I heard it over the ring. Caleb. He turned to me then, and his silence answered before his voice could. Lillian raised her as Ava Monroe. The car seemed to shrink around me. Air left my lungs. My mother was not my mother. She was, Caleb said immediately, and for the first time, his voice lost its control. She earned that name every day she kept you alive. I pressed the bracelet against my chest because I needed to hold something, anything, while the life I knew folded in on itself. Outside, the city blurred into silver lines and moving headlights. Inside, Caleb whispered the truth that made every locked door, every warning, every lie finally make sense. Evelyn was not trying to bury Clara anymore. She was trying to find you. I wanted to argue with Caleb. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that I was just Ava Monroe from Queens, the daughter of a tired night nurse who clipped coupons and hummed old songs while folding laundry. But the bracelet in my hand felt colder now, heavier, like it had been waiting my whole life to become proof. Caleb gave me 10 minutes. Not because 10 minutes was enough, but because it was all the city would allow before Evelyn moved again. We left Bryant Park and drove to a public library on 5th Avenue, where the reading rooms were quiet and the marble stairs smelled faintly of raincoats and old paper. Caleb chose a computer in the corner, away from the windows. He stood behind me while I typed the address he recited from memory. My fingers hovered over the keyboard when the password box appeared. Clara's engraving looked impossible in my palm, a string of numbers and letters hidden beneath 12 years of silence. I entered it once. The screen loaded. For a second, nothing happened. Then a folder opened with Clara Whitmore's name at the top. Audio files, scanned documents, bank transfers, legal letters, a video statement dated the night before everything collapsed. My throat closed. Caleb stepped back as if the sight physically hurt him. Play it, he said. Clara appeared on the screen in a soft blue hospital light, younger than I had imagined, with pale skin, tired eyes, and the same silver bracelet on her wrist. Her voice was shaking, but her words were clear. She named Evelyn. She named judges, donors, hospital administrators, men and women who had smiled on charity boards while moving money through the shadows. She said Caleb had tried to stop it. She said if anything happened to her, the truth was not with the police, because the police had already been touched by the same hands. Then Clara looked straight into the camera and placed one hand over her stomach. I am not only protecting records, she whispered. I am protecting my daughter. The room dissolved around me. The library, the rain, the rows of strangers reading newspapers, all of it fell away until only that word remained. Daughter. Caleb reached for the edge of the desk, his knuckles turning white. I could not breathe. Clara's daughter. My mother by blood. A woman I had only known through altered files and one hidden bracelet. The video ended with another voice entering softly from off-camera. My mother's voice. Lillian. I will take her somewhere safe, she said. I promise. I pressed my hand to my mouth, but no tears came at first. The pain was too new to understand how to leave my body. Then my phone began buzzing again and again. Natalie. Mr. Harlan. Unknown numbers. News alerts. My name appeared in a headline before I even opened it. Courthouse employee under review after unauthorized access to sealed Mafia-related records. Another alert followed. Sources question mental stability of records clerk connected to Caleb Whitmore. I stared at the words until they blurred. Evelyn was not sending men into dark hallways. She was doing something cleaner. She was turning the world against me before I could speak. Caleb read over my shoulder, and his face went still in that terrible way I was beginning to understand. I stood up too fast, the chair scraping against the floor. Everyone will think I made this up, I whispered. Everyone already thinks I am unstable. Caleb took the bracelet from the desk and closed my fingers around it. His hand was warm, steady, careful. They did not believe you because they were never meant to, he said. This city was built on my silence. I looked at him then, at the man who had carried a ruined name to keep me alive, and something inside me stopped running. What do we do now? I asked. Caleb's eyes lifted toward the library windows, where cameras from a news van had just turned toward the entrance. Now, he said, we stop asking them to believe us. We make them listen. The news cameras outside the library made the sidewalk feel smaller than it was. Caleb did not push through them. He did not hide from them either. He made one phone call, spoke 3 quiet sentences, and within 20 minutes a black car took us to the federal courthouse downtown. Not the records annex where this had begun, but the taller building with glass doors, armed guards, and flags snapping in the rain like warnings. My name was already everywhere. Ava Monroe, unstable clerk. Ava Monroe, unauthorized access. Ava Monroe, possible accomplice of Caleb Whitmore. The words followed me across every screen in the lobby. I kept Clara's bracelet closed in my fist until the edges pressed marks into my palm. Caleb walked beside me, not touching me, but close enough that the room understood I was not alone anymore. People stepped back when they saw him. Some out of fear, some out of habit. Evelyn Shaw was already inside the private hearing room, seated at the long table in a cream suit, her silver hair perfect, her face arranged into sympathy. She looked at me like I was something unfortunate that needed to be handled gently before being removed. Mr. Harlan sat 2 chairs away from her, pale and sweating. 2 attorneys whispered over folders. A federal investigator stood near the wall. Everyone turned when Caleb opened the door. No one spoke. That was his power. Not volume. Not movement. Silence obeyed him before people did. Evelyn recovered first. Caleb, she said softly, this has gone far enough. Miss Monroe clearly needs help. Caleb pulled out the chair beside me. Sit down, Ava. His voice was calm, but this time the calm did not frighten me. It steadied me. I sat. My knees were trembling beneath the table, but my hands were not. Evelyn folded her fingers together. This young woman has been misled by grief, restricted files, and your influence. Caleb looked at her for a long moment. Then he placed a small black drive on the table. 12 years ago, he said, I let this city believe a lie because I thought silence was the only way to keep a child alive. Evelyn's expression did not change, but her fingers tightened. Caleb continued. That child is sitting beside me. The room shifted. A chair creaked. Someone inhaled sharply. I felt every eye turn toward me, but for the first time, I did not shrink. Caleb nodded once, and the investigator connected the drive to the screen at the end of the room. Clara appeared in blue hospital light, wearing the silver bracelet I held in my hand. Her voice filled the room, soft but clear, naming accounts, dates, signatures, and the people who had built a kingdom on altered records. Then my mother's voice came through. Lillian Monroe, promising to take Clara's daughter somewhere safe. Mr. Harlan lowered his head. One attorney stopped writing. Evelyn finally looked away. When the video ended, no one rushed to defend her. That was how I knew truth had entered the room. Not loudly, not dramatically, just completely. Caleb stood beside me, his face carved from restraint. I buried the truth to keep her alive, he said. Tonight, I burned the lie to keep her free. Evelyn whispered his name, but it no longer sounded powerful. It sounded old. The investigator asked for the bracelet. I opened my hand and gave it to him. For 12 years, it had been proof, key, inheritance, and burden. Now it was evidence. My mother had not left me a fortune. She had left me a choice. Believe the world, or believe what she had protected with her life. When we stepped outside later, the rain had stopped. Cameras flashed across the courthouse steps, bright as lightning, but I did not flinch. Caleb stood beside me, his ruined name no longer between us, his silence finally broken. I once thought the truth would save him. I was wrong. Truth does not save people by itself. It waits for someone brave enough to carry it into a room where everyone has been paid not to listen. If this emotional mafia romance and hidden family betrayal kept you watching, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and comment your thoughts about Ava Monroe, Caleb Whitmore, and the secret that changed everything. Turn on the notification bell so you do not miss the next dark romance story, mafia boss mystery, and powerful truth revealed on this channel. Continue to the next video for another intense love story filled with secrets, loyalty, and redemption. Thank you for watching, and I promise the next video will uncover an even deeper secret.